pain is actually in the brain, it's not in your physical body.
Ought not to be so threatening if we could all work together a bit better. At that point, I really kind of asked myself, like, what was most meaningful to me.
I'm Liz, also known as Mazlow. Came up with the name Mazlow because I'm a clinical psychologist. It derives from Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is a theory of human motivation that is based off the idea that if you provide people with the right circumstances, the right environment, they will thrive. And it's about humans being inherently good, which I think is something that's hard to hold on to these days. I found that with house music and electronic music and festivals, one of the things I loved so much about it was that people seem to really manifest the best versions of themselves, to really feel free and open and comfortable because they have a lot of their needs met. So it's this idea of this hierarchy of needs, which at the very core includes safety, belonging, community, and esteem in who one is. And I think house music really provides that. So if I can offer that as a DJ and create an environment like that, it can be really meaningful. So that's where Mazlow came from. I do a lot of things. For my profession or my career, I guess currently I am a clinical psychologist. I'm also a DJ and a producer in the making. For undergraduate, I went to Yale, and for graduate school, I went to the University of Maryland in College Park. I feel like when talking about having gone to Yale, I feel like damned if I do, damned if I don't in terms of whether I talk about it, because I feel like I sound like an asshole if I'm like, oh, I went to Yale. But I also am an asshole if I assume that that means something, you know? So it's a very difficult kind of in between. I really loved my experience there. It's a place where I finally felt for the first time in life, I think, that there are people like-minded to me who had the same interests and values. Playing soccer there was an incredible experience. I had a lot of injuries, but being a part of the team, being part of the athlete community was really special. And I went into Yale thinking that I wanted to be a medical doctor, and I turned down some other programs for college that would have funneled me into that. And I'm so glad that I did, because I realized at Yale that I was much more interested in the philosophy of human existence and human suffering, and really ultimately where I've ended up now in clinical psychology. So it was a place where I really grew up, I really felt at home, and I really am grateful to have had the opportunity to go. It's one of the best gifts I think that soccer brought me in life, was to be able to pursue that as a dream. I decided I wanted to go there when I was 12. So it was a dream for a while. That's how my brain works. When I've decided I want to do something, just wait, because eventually it will happen. I'll find a way to make it happen. I won't take no for an answer. So hopefully that will ring true with music as well, but we'll see. I started DJing in earnest about 2 years ago. I've been playing for fun at house parties and other kind of low-key events before that, just as a very side hobby, but it was not until I had my first gig in an actual club in January of the year before last that I started DJing more seriously. Just the mutual exchange of energy with people that are on the dance floor. I feed off them, they feed off me, hopefully, if I'm doing a good job. Just creating an environment where people are enjoying themselves and feeling free and dancing and having fun is a really rewarding thing to be able to create. And when I'm also doing that from a place that feels authentic, because it's music that I love as well, and I'm also sharing that energy and that experience, I think when those two, well, I guess there's a few things. When those things align, it feels really good. And it's really a meaningful and also satisfying feeling. My favorite thing about DJing is when I get to share an experience with the people on the dance floor and have this exchange of energy back and forth, where that's coming from an authentic place that is music that I love and also creates an environment and a space for people to really enjoy themselves. I've been DJing more seriously just for the last couple of years, and that started when I finished my doctoral degree in clinical psychology, and I realized that I had dedicated so much of my life towards that end. And while I love what I do, I continue to work as a clinical psychologist. I work for the Veterans Affairs in Virginia, and I treat chronic pain and do a combination of seeing patients individually and in groups and working with providers of other disciplines to help build out patient-centered care when it comes to pain. I love it. I have never really done something truly just for me. And so when I finished that degree and started DJing, it kind of lit a fire in me in a different way. And so I hope to continue to do both work as a psychologist and DJing for as long as I can maintain both. I have big aspirations in music now because it is something that I felt like I would regret not pursuing to the fullest, and I've never really let things go once I make that decision. So it may take me a little bit longer because I'm balancing the two, but ultimately really want to be moving more and more towards music while maintaining kind of the values I have as a psychologist and continue to work in some capacity to that end. At this point, my biggest hobby outside of music and my career is soccer. I grew up playing competitive soccer. I had aspirations of playing professionally, ended up playing Division I in college, which I really enjoyed, and haven't been able to give it up since, even though my body's been aging and fighting me. I still play 3 to 4 times a week. I still enjoy watching the Premier League, the Champions League, the women who play all over the world, and it's a big passion of mine. So I would say that's probably my primary hobby outside of my goals in music.
Yeah, so one of the things I do is I provide background and education on what chronic pain is and how it differs from acute pain, because a lot of times people aren't necessarily aware. So I provide an orientation session to veterans who are referred to pain services to help them get the lay of the land when it comes to the treatment available and also understand what it is that they're dealing with. So the goal of the program that I'm a part of is to help provide veterans with knowledge, education, skills, and strategies to help them manage their pain and better their quality of life. Pain is, by definition, an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience that's associated with actual or potential tissue damage or described in terms of such damage. So a few things that are really important in this definition. One is that it's inherently sensory and emotional. You cannot separate that. So no matter what, you'll be experiencing both when you experience pain. The other is that it could be associated with actual or potential tissue damage or described in terms of such damage. So pain is actually in the brain. It's not in your physical body. So pain is a signal that your brain decides to send you when it perceives that there's danger to part of your body. And it's interpreting that from the signals it's receiving from the receptors that you have in that area that are connected to your nervous system. So there may or may not actually be damage in that area of the body, even though you're feeling pain. And a lot of times with chronic pain, you have an injury or a surgery or sort of an initial problem. And we know that tissue generally heals in 3 to 6 months, but you have ongoing pain. And you're like, well, I have screws in that part of my ankle, so it's no wonder I have ongoing pain. Well, actually, that ankle's probably healed pretty good. You have ongoing pain because the nervous system has learned that there's been trauma and danger to that part of the body. It learned what was particularly dangerous for your ankle at the time you were healing, and it continues to remember those dangers, and it has fears about that. It becomes oversensitive. So the longer we're in pain, the less specific pain becomes, and the more sensitive our nervous system is and our brain is to sounding the alarm that there may be danger. So a lot of times we have ongoing pain even though we don't necessarily have damage in that part of the body. And this is obviously made worse if you have a history of trauma, or if the injury happens during a time when you're particularly stressed, or if you have ongoing stress, because your tolerance for that alarm, it becomes more and more sensitive the more stressed we are. If you think about it as a cup that can be filled with water, you don't want it to overflow. Well, it's going to be already filled up to here if you're stressed out, and pain's going to very easily tip it over for you to experience that. So that's why we're treating with chronic pain the nervous system, sort of the software of the body, just as much as we are the hardware, and getting people to think about a biopsychosocial model of medical care versus a biomedical one. Because if our biomedical treatments worked for chronic pain, we wouldn't have chronic pain, right? We'd be able to make it go away. Well, what's really happening is stuff beyond what the eye can see in the nervous system, in the brain, and in the brain connected to all other aspects of what make us who we are. So that's why, history of trauma, just the way we think, the decisions we make, all can be related to pain and vice versa.
I've thought a lot about whether to share this, but if I'm answering this question honestly, then I would share it, which is there's one moment on my journey to becoming a doctor that sticks with me today. Gosh, where do I start with it? I think sorry, it's not anything to talk about, so I'm trying to find the words to talk about it. Because of things that I experienced as a kid and what my family went through when I was young, and other things that happened as a result of that, and the intersection of those things. I've always been somebody who's taken care of other people, and who's been really passionate about that, and sometimes to my own detriment. So there was a point in graduate school where I was really struggling, and I wasn't sure. I was kind of in between my master's and PhD, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to continue because I was learning so much about myself and how I was starting to feel like I had just ended up there just by nature of who I was, given what I had been through, and not because I had necessarily chosen to be there. It's like, this is just who I am because of how life has made me, but not because I necessarily want to be this way or be doing these things. And I got to a point where it's hard to say, looking back on it, given the nuances of the situation, but I came very, very close to taking my own life, a few millimeters away close. And at that point, I really kind of asked myself what was most meaningful to me, and what I wanted to be spending my time doing, and who I wanted to be as a person, and all these things. And that's when I really started to choose my career as a psychologist and choose who I wanted to be every day. And music is one of the first things, beyond the relationship I have with work now as a clinical psychologist. Music is really one of the first things that I've done just for me, because I love it. And I think if I hadn't gone through that process of choosing the career that I chose in earnest, I don't know that I would be here choosing music the way that I have. And it just lights a fire inside me to chase everything I can with music, because I'm so passionate about it, and because I'm doing it for me. I still get anxiety when I say the words "I'm doing it for me," but I'm here, and music is so special to me because of that. And in doing it for me, I've been able to share so much joy with other people, and that has been so meaningful, so much more meaningful than just inherently being somebody who listens well. I choose to listen, I choose to show up, I love doing that. But music I choose to do just for me.
Who are some of my favorite artists in the DC area? There are many. I think right off the bat, I have to say Misha and Late London, particularly Late London, and just to see the evolution of music that he's produced and put out there. It's very aligned with what I like to play and the sound that I enjoy, and I've really just appreciated seeing how his artistry has evolved over time, and seeing other people kind of catch on and appreciate him for who he is as well. And with Misha, it's a bit of a more underground sound, even a step further, but also again, just admiring kind of where he started and where he is now and what it is that he's been able to do. I will say there are a lot of women that have been very successful in recent times and are coming up, and I see them in a similar vein. I mentioned Bridget as a mentor of mine, also a good friend and someone that I know I'm gonna appreciate any set she puts together. She's just super talented. Same thing with Abco, incredibly talented. And Fatima, it's the same thing. She's not always playing the genre of music that I love, but it's always something that is a musical journey, and it's very well thought out and just incredible in terms of what she's able to put together, and she's producing now as well, and I think that that's only going to continue to take off.
Is ego hurting the music scene in DC? I guess it's important for me to say that I'm still learning how to navigate the music scene in DC, so I'm still every day understanding more and more about some of the politics that go into the music scene and how that all plays out, what the different interactions even can mean at times. I think when most people think about ego, they think about selfishness, they think about narcissism perhaps, they think about competition. For me, ego is more about vulnerability, really what matters most to people, because when that feels threatened is when we see those other characteristics come out. And so I've tried to pay attention to that as a new artist and really understand what is it that a promoter or a collective or another artist is trying to do, and how can I assess the extent to which that's congruent with what I'm trying to do, and if it is in some mutually beneficial way, how can I support whatever it is that they're doing? Can I support what they're doing, and then how do I do that? And I find that that's it's helped me understand really the importance of integrity and respect and good communication. And I do wish that some of the other artists that I've met or other people that I've worked with would understand and have those values in a similar way. Because I think when we don't, that's when ego gets in the way and people view each other as a threat. And so I have seen some of that, and it's disappointing and sometimes frustrating, because I do think that the scene is growing in such a way where if we could support each other in the best possible way, there wouldn't need to be as much of that threat. It could be more mutually beneficial relationships. So I think it's certainly a factor. It always will be a factor, particularly in entertainment and when people's bottom lines are what they're most concerned about. But I think it's also something that speaks to something deeper that's more meaningful, that really ought not to be so threatening if we could all work together a bit better and collaborate. And collaborations have been the most honestly rewarding experiences I've had between collectives, between artists. I mentioned that being able to support other artists is one of the most meaningful things about this whole journey for me, that inspires me the most, and I think that that can be true on a broader scale for other artists in DC as we grow the scene more and more here. And I hope that that's something that will evolve as the scene evolves. As more people are coming out to gigs and there's less, perhaps, competition, because the market right now I think is relatively saturated, and I see why people can feel threatened.
How do I feel about requests? I mean, I would say it definitely depends on the environment. In some situations, it's more appropriate, I think, than in other situations, given the cultural context. So, there are times where I'll be playing a set on the intention is really to provide entertainment. In that context, I understand requests. I may not always have the song, but I will use the request as an opportunity to understand what the crowd may be looking for if I'm not hitting that particular genre or sound or energy. I would say as a woman, I feel like as a woman DJ, female DJ, sometimes gender politics dynamics, power dynamics come into play, and I have found that sometimes men have no problem walking right up to you in a situation where it's probably not the most appropriate to ask for a song that they want you to play, even if it's within the genre of whatever you might actually be playing. So even if it's a minimal deep tech track, I'm kind of scratching my head. Am I inspiring this person and that's why they're asking for this request? Or is it more about the power dynamic here that has to do with gender politics, and then I'm kind of working through my own reaction? So in general, I don't love them, but I would say I always try to consider where it's coming from and how can that shape the choices I'm making to provide a better experience for the people that are there, because ultimately that's what DJing is all about. So I don't take offense to it. I don't find it to be problematic necessarily. It's more about the context and what it's about for that person that I try to understand, and how can I deliver, again, the most optimal experience for people on the dance floor. I think it really is so hard to pick like one specific moment. I think I've always referred to myself and like been for my sister like her number one cheerleader, like her just biggest fan. And like in moments where I've seen her like doubt in herself or kind of feel like vulnerable putting herself out there, especially with the beginnings of her music career, like it's been the moments where I see her overcome that and just like put herself out there anyway, and then also just try something different or kind of like take the leap of faith a little bit with herself and like just let go of all of her doubts or let go of her, getting in her own way, like, and then see her just absolutely shine, like, and see everyone receive her in such a way where it's like the whole crowd's moving, everyone's like so fired up, she's feeling like in her zone and just like so authentically radiating her energy and like channeling that into her music. And those are the moments where like she'll she'll laugh, I laugh, but I'm always like up there like starting to be like, oh, 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 like when she like drops a beat or something, and then like just when something clicks, and like those moments are so like my proudest moments for sure, because I just feel like she has always been her harshest critic. She's always been someone who is truly unstoppable. Like when she sets her mind to something, it's like truly unbelievable. She's a force to be reckoned with, but like sometimes she doubts that in herself. These are hard for me to answer. I mean, my sister's like the strongest person that I know. And she's always fighting. So I think that sorry. Yeah, I'm gonna get emotional at that. I think that like it's hard to pinpoint like her changing in any one way, because I think like she's been someone who's been so committed to like fighting through her demons and like staying on this course of trying to better herself and trying to like understand herself more and more and work through the things that like have been, weighing on her for so long. And like I think that commitment she has to continuing to like grow and like evolve herself in that way, like I don't know how to answer this, but she's just like so fucking strong. She's so fucking strong. She's the strongest person I know. And the way she's been putting herself into music and like having like leaning into that outlet, and the way that community has been a safe space for her also like has been such a lifeline. And like so it's like so powerful that she's leaned into that and has been kind of using that outlet to express herself, even in any given moment where she's like feeling something, she just starts playing around and making music now. And like that is so unbelievable to me, right? Like she has this like expression now that she's channeling what she's feeling into something that's awesome, and like that gets people going, and like that you can feel, and like that is that like tangible outlet she's now channeling
herself into with her music is just like, I think, so powerful, and that's obviously been a change, to be putting herself into all of that and then now having this like channel of expression. I think has been so good for her and so like authentic, and like you just like feel it. You feel that outlet for her.
About the sync button. Wow, what a controversial topic. I think it's important to be able to DJ without the sync button. There was a gig I had in New York City one time where the CDJs they had were an old enough version that there was no waveform, there was no sync button, and this was earlier on in my DJ days. And if I had not been able to beat match by ear in that circumstance, I would have been in big trouble. And in fact, another DJ that night wasn't able to, and the whole room cleared and the party shut down, and it was really awkward and uncomfortable because it was at a really popular Lower East Side bar. So I think it's critical to know your way around the music that you're DJing, to understand it, to be able to do that by ear, not even just by waveform. But I also have no problem using the sync button. I think I use it more often than not in high stakes situations where I know I've prepared and I know my music is well analyzed, because it gives me more bandwidth to use effects, to be present with the crowd, to just have one slight less like worry or thing that I'm juggling in my mind to have to pay attention to. So I've had mentors tell me that as well. Everyone has a different take, but I think DJing for me is about the tracks I'm choosing, the timing of when I'm transitioning between them, and the ways I'm manipulating the music, and less about proving that I know how to sync up the downbeat. I think most DJs should be comfortable doing that, but I don't know that that is what defines a good DJ anymore. And in fact, I continue to be super impressed by my friends who spin vinyl. I don't understand how they do that. I mean, it's an amazing talent. It's like a really incredible part of mixing music. I just think in today's day and age, the technology is so advanced, everyone has access to it. What are you doing beyond that to make yourself be a good DJ? Because dying on that hill isn't going to do you any good, because the technology exists. So that's just my take. Some people will die on that hill, or probably other people in this series will die on that hill, but I personally will not die on that hill. One word to describe the underground music scene in DC: growing. You asked why. I mean, there are more and more venues. There's more and more demand. It can now hold multiple events on one night that are not super commercial, and those multiple events can perform well. I think there's more DJs than ever, and I think there's a lot of talent in DC in that regard. Also with production too, there's just so much talent and potential. I think the biggest challenge is being able to afford to host artists that have a more underground sound, that are traveling from other places, and to be able to bring them into venues in DC. But I think that DC is going to get there. I think that the biggest thing that's been a challenge for the growth in DC is that artists have left DC when they've gotten to a certain point of success. But now I think people are choosing to stay, and I think the underground aspect of it is evolving as there's more interest in the scene in general. Because if it's underground but nobody really knows about it, or has their gateway, which is the house music that's all the way in between to get to it, then it doesn't have the bandwidth, the interest for people to continue to cultivate it. But I think that cultivation is there now. So I just expect it to continue to grow. So this past weekend, I was fortunate to have 2 gigs on Friday night, and there are also a few parties that I plan on attending on Saturday. And on Friday, the lineup, the first gig I had, I want to say there were, gosh, how many DJs were on that lineup? 10, maybe?
8 sounds right.
Yeah, 8 or 9. I was the only woman, I guess only non-cisgender man, because gender identity is more complicated than that. But anyway, and then the second gig that I played at the 3 floors at Flash, actually representation there was much better. There were myself, and then there was a woman on each other floor as well. But still, total, out of the whole night, I think with 16 or 17 DJs, there were 3 women total. And then the following night of the parties that I went to, 10 men. And the other party I was considering on going to on Friday, or would go to if I was free, all men. And that one irked me a little bit because I was sort of on the periphery of the planning that went into that, and knew that there were women available who volunteered their time, and they were not booked for it. So long story short, I think there's a lot more female or non-male talent out there than is being represented on lineups. And I posted on my close friend's Instagram story on Friday, sort of a pledge to myself to do more about that next year, because I think, you know, that will be the change you want to see in the world thing. And now I feel like I've been lucky to have people give me the opportunity to play. So I feel like paying that forward in ways that I'm able to is important to me. I'm still figuring out what that looks like. But post this on my Instagram story. This is the kind of reply that you sometimes get from people about this sort of thing. This guy says, the problem is the politics. Female, male doesn't matter. Book the best talent. If you go out of your way as a promoter to curate a lineup based solely on sex proportions, you're not about the music in my book. On the face of it, I don't really disagree with that, because I think it should be about the music. But when you say this, you're implying that there are not talented female artists out there. Like, you're saying that you can't have more women on lineups or more diverse gender identifying individuals because it would be booking for the politics. What if it's just booking to book the most talented people, and recognizing that there are so many more hurdles for people who do not identify as men? Individual also said to me, well, you have the advantage right now. And I said, what do you mean? I mean, we weren't even talking about gender. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he goes, well, yeah, everybody just wants to book women right now. I said girls, actually. Whatever. That's another rabbit hole we could go down, but we do not need to do that right now. And I do understand that, like, there is opportunity, because obviously efforts are being made to have more diversity on lineups. But I think sometimes what's missed is that there's also a lot of pressure and expectation to perform, because if you don't, then it's up, well, she was just booked for XYZ reason, not because she's actually talented. So I feel almost more pressure to blow it out of the water every time, because I feel like I have to prove something. I have to prove that I deserve to be there. It's the same thing as playing soccer my whole life. I have to prove that I can be trusted with the ball. Every single time I play with a new group of dudes, it's the same thing, and it's so frustrating because I have to demonstrate my worth before it's, before I'm given the benefit of the doubt. And it's like just having to prove. Sometimes it does become tiring, and it's a challenge. Obviously, I'm up for it. It doesn't, But when somebody says something like, you have the advantage right now, says that booking more diversity is about politics, just not aware of his own bias at all. And his bias in this case is that women are not potentially as talented, or there aren't as many women out there that can do what he perceives himself as being able to do. And you just run into that on like a both implicit and explicit level all the time. And you see guys dapping each other up and booking each other and partying together, and for a while I kind of wanted to be more included in that because I felt like I had to work my way into it. But over time I've realized that the relationships I have with people in music that I value are the ones that are the most authentic, the most genuine, the ones where I feel the most supported on a level that's about like the long haul, the long view, and the things that really matter to me, and not just like the superficial, surface level stuff. So you just kind of put your head down and keep moving forward.